This week, the topic is a question that I get asked every so often is, can you get dietary iron from cooking in a cast iron skillet?
Okay, all right. Well, I know iron is something that's more of a concern for women than men, right?
Yes, it definitely is. Yeah.
I was a woman asking that question.
It was, actually.
Okay.
I know for a fact that it was a woman that asked the question.
So she was a student?
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So, and actually it was in the context of, we were studying certain dietary restrictions, and if there's a certain risk of having low iron intake in your diet, would cooking if you cooked all your meals in a cast iron skillet, would that make up for it?
Right. Okay.
So the answer of whether you can get iron from cooking in a cast iron skillet is yes, but
okay.
It depends on what you're cooking in the skillet, and it also depends on the age of the skillet.
Oh.
Yeah, and this is something interesting. So, not all foods will absorb iron. So, not everything you cook in a cast iron skillet will absorb iron.
Okay, it's just not made to absorb it. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, it has to do with the acidity of the food. And then the other thing is, there was a classic study. This is an often cited study, and if you look up this question online, you'll find this study everywhere. There was a study that was done that showed that the foods that do absorb iron, they absorbed more iron in a brand new cast iron skillet.
Oh.
Like basically what the study did was they took 20 different foods, cooked them in cast iron skillets, and they did brand new cast iron skillet, old well-seasoned cast iron skillets, and then something that wasn't iron, like a Corningware.
Okay.
And they wanted to compare the differences between how much iron what was the iron content in the food before cooking it in the skillet, and then after.
I'd want to know.
And so what they found was, in a brand new cast iron skillet, foods did absorb significant amounts of iron from the skillet. In the well-seasoned ones, though, the ones that were older, it didn't absorb as much iron. And of course, in a Corningware, it didn't absorb anything because there's no iron in Corningware to absorb. So now what also they found was foods that are more acidic. The top of the list was tomato sauce. Like if you make a spaghetti sauce or anything with tomato in it in your cast iron skillet, it's acidic. Tomatoes are acidic, so they're going to absorb more iron. Acid is actually needed to dissolve or extract iron from a metal.
Okay.
So that's a really important component in the food, is you have to have some acidity. They also did applesauce. They made applesauce in a cast iron skillet, and it absorbed a lot of iron into that because of the citric acid that's in apples. When they cooked other things like cornbread, or like they baked a cornbread in the cast iron skillet, didn't really get that much iron out of it. It got a little from the brand new one, but not really any from the seasoned one. So now the seasoned cast iron skillets are, everyone loves a well-seasoned cast iron skillet because it's like a great non-stick skillet.
Well, yes, we should explain a little bit about what happens. If you buy a cast iron skillet, it's going to stick like nobody's business, which makes it very difficult to work with until you begin to what's called season it, which means basically not clean it. Is that basically?
Well, yeah. So what happens in an old cast iron skillet is when you use oils in it, it develops like a thin coating that is formed when fat is heated to high temperatures in the skillet, and then that coating makes it a great non-stick skillet, but it also makes it less reactive with any acid in the food, therefore not much iron is transferred to the food from a well-seasoned cast iron skillet. So the more you season your cast iron skillet, the less iron you're going to get out of it. So I think the what I would call the information about cooking in a cast iron skillet is a great source of dietary iron is really, it's not a valid assumption, because most people are using well-seasoned older cast iron skillets for cooking, and so you're not really going to get, you don't expect to meet your dietary requirement for iron by just using your cast iron skillet for cooking all your meals. and the reason being, not everything you cook in there is going to be an acidic thing.
Right.
And also, if it's a well-seasoned one, it won't absorb much.
So have you recommended iron to clients, like in a pill?
Only if they have what I would call a documented or a proven deficiency in iron, meaning they had a blood test that showed they were low in iron, because otherwise you do not want to get too much iron. Typically, I do not recommend iron supplements for men unless they have a documented deficiency,
right,
because they don't need much iron. Women tend to need it more because they lose blood during the menstrual cycle monthly, so they may need to increase their iron intake, but I would recommend doing it through foods first before supplements.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Anything else on this question before we go?
Well, since just one little tidbit more to add. Yeah. Since acidity in foods like tomatoes or apples can increase the absorption of iron from a cast iron skillet, it can also absorb increase the absorption of iron from other foods you eat it with. Like let's say you eat spinach, and we know that spinach has iron in it, but it's not well absorbed as just from spinach. We know that iron from plant foods is not as well absorbed as iron from something like meat.
Okay.
But you can increase the absorbability of iron from plant foods if you add something acidic into the meal. So if you squeeze some lemon juice on your spinach salad, or you can even add foods that have vitamin C in them, because vitamin C is basically ascorbic acid. So things like lemon juice, or even orange, like if you wanted to squeeze orange on there, or like bell peppers. Things that have acidity. In fact, there was a study that showed just adding like the 63 milligrams of ascorbic acid, which is what you would get in half of a red bell pepper. If you just added that to your meal, you're going to get triple the absorption of iron from your vegetables and fruits that have iron in them.
And could it be just like what you'd squeeze out of maybe half a lemon? Is that enough?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So like certain foods like beans have iron, and so does things like green leafies like spinach. So, but it's not well absorbed. So if you add something with vitamin C to the meal that you're eating there, you get more absorption.
Yeah, that's helpful information.